Hi everyone, my name's PK, and here I have Dawn Fouhy, who's an amazing community member of the Facebook group and of this YouTube channel and podcast community right here. Dawn is so awesome. Why? Because she helps other people in the community. She's been a key contributor, and by being such, she herself has benefited from the community and purchased 4 properties in the last 12 months. In this episode, we'll talk about her challenges as a female, like how to actually become an investor as a female and all the obstacles that she's faced and how she's overcome them. We'll talk about the skepticism or the scaredness, if that's a word, what she's been fearful of, whether it's locations or anything else in property and how she's overcome that. We'll talk about her why, like why is she doing this in the first place? Is it about Lamborghinis or is it about something a little bit more elevated in consciousness? And we'll talk about different locations and her strategy and all this sort of things. Welcome to the Oz Property Investment Mastery Podcast. My name's PK and I help busy people build passive income by buying top 5% growth and cash flow property and build a portfolio using data without wasting months doing research, spending weekends at inspection or catching flights, or dropping $10,000 to $20,000 on buyer's agents every single time. So if you're confused, lack confidence, and just overwhelmed with all the information and marketing misinformation available online and don't know where to start, then this show is for you. Dawn, without any further ado, I'm genuinely grateful from the first point you reached out to me more than 12 months ago to now for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, PK.
No, the gratitude is from me to you. And the first question, I mean, we talked about this before we hit record, but the first question I really want to deep dive on is like your why. You know, you're an immigrant, as am I. You've obviously been working very hard in Australia to make a name for yourself, so to speak. In other words, just put, food on the table, just get ahead. Like, why start property investing? What are you trying to get out of it?
So the main thing for us with investing in property is to use it as a vehicle for freedom. And freedom to us is not, the Maldives or Lamborghinis. Freedom to us is time. Time to be able to spend with our family and friends, not working night shifts all the time, and trying to provide the best education possible for our son, and also to inspire our son to not following the traditional teachings of education. Not once in investing have I used Pythagoras's theory when trying to close a deal, or pulled out a recorder because I've learned how to play Three Blind Mice. I think there's such a huge gap in education for financial literacy, and also financial savvy. Like, if I had known what I have known now 10 years ago, I would have been retired. I would have set on a totally different path. So yes, our why is so important. Our why is around our community and our family and having time and freedom.
Sure. I'm very conscious that about 75% of my audience is male, and in fact, 75% of the investors in Australia are male. You're a nurse. You mentioned before. I don't know if this is like totally politically incorrect statement, and I'm just like really ignorant, but my assumption or stereotype is that the majority of nurses as well are females. Forgive me if that's wrong. What's like the zeitgeist amongst that profession? Like, do nurses, like at the water cooler, like between patients or whatever, do you guys talk about finance? Do you guys talk about money? Do you guys talk about providing for your family? Or like, what's the culture like?
So, firstly, the culture in nursing is that of community, but you rely on each other more so as kind of mental companions to deal with what we're faced with every day. Um, but insofar as like having financial discussions, no. So I definitely see there's great scope to help and inspire so many people in the medical field to find freedom through property, and to give themselves back some free time, which they well and truly deserve from serving their community.
So if you didn't hear about or weren't really inspired about property through like your work colleagues, how did you, because you know you've only recently started this journey like just over a year ago. What did bring you to property, and like is this a whole thing like a house of cards? Is it just like some get rich quick scam? Like how did you build trust in this avenue for wealth creation?
So I think it actually all started 10 years ago. We were on our balcony and we heard an auction taking place. We were living in an apartment at a time, so inner city Melbourne. We were like, wow, that sold for 300,000. Like we could afford that. Like, why are we renting? And so we had bought our first PPOR property, which was a villa in Melbourne, about 28 k's from the CBD. And by some sort of fluke, we didn't have any knowledge of cycles or anything like that. We bought that for 480,000, and within 3 years, it had grown to 653. And so we were like, oh, we want to start a family. We should probably upgrade and buy a bigger property, which is what every Australian normally does, is the normal progression of upgrading before you have a family and before you realize that the property you're buying before you have a family is not actually what you're going to need. So we got stuck in that trap and we ended up buying a townhouse, which we have now outgrown. So again, knowing what we know now, I would have started rent vesting, I think, 10 years ago and been in a totally different position. But we always had a passion for property and, visiting open homes and just always keeping an eye on the market. And I think for years we felt like, oh, it wasn't for us and it's only rich people who invest. And
Mm.
like, what would we know about investing? Like, I'm a nurse from like the bogs of Ireland, basically. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. It certainly wasn't a conversation around our dinner table about property investing. I don't know anybody in our life who invests in property. But the way you present your content on YouTube makes it feel achievable. It makes it feel like, because at the start I didn't know LVR from LMI to anything. I was like, equity who? Like, there's just so much to learn. But if you put the time and invest in yourself and educate yourself, you become fearless with the knowledge that you gain. And so yeah, January 2022. Actually, prior to that, before we went borderless for our first investment, we were looking at Wodonga because we were like, oh, it'd be nice to be able to drive to the property and see it, and da 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 da.
Yeah.
Again, unlearning those old beliefs, and we actually had an offer in on a property in Wodonga, and looking back, we had put in too much. It was overpriced, firstly, to begin with, and luckily we didn't secure that property. Luckily. So
Right.
following all of your YouTube videos and just like, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the classic kind of like, investor starter pack. We went on to purchase in Port Kennedy in WA. So we secured that property. It was a Friday night, 10 o'clock. And all I remember learning is get the open home cancelled, like get the open home cancelled. So it was our very first property. We put in an offer. It was under the median value at the time. So we got that property for 420,000. It was a 4x2 on, I think it's on nearly 800 square meters. It's in a court on the beach side, and it rents now for 500. We've had the same tenants in it since we bought it like last year, and I think the yield on that is 6.1 or 6.2% on that one.
Right.
And we recently had a rent increase on that one
Right.
as well.
Before we go on, because when you're saying this, I'm coming up with like people's immediate
Of course, of
objections
course.
to that purchase. So let me be the mouthpiece for those people. The first objection that I would, like put my hand up and say, oh, but Dawn, why did you buy in Perth? Like, especially as a first-time investor, doesn't Perth like crash? Isn't it just like exclusively based on mining booms and mining busts? It's not risen for the last 7 years. Why did your first property is the most important? Why did you take such a risk in going with Perth? That is quote unquote what people are thinking. Please answer.
Of course. So, well, the aim was never to just stop at one property. If I wanted to stop at one property, I would have bought a unit in Bondi, or I would have bought something in Newcastle that was 900,000 and maxed out all of my borrowing capacity. But the whole purpose of investing for us and our why is to build a portfolio that's scalable, right? So we wanted to buy in a growth area that was showing like reducing days on market, the vacancy rates were dropping. Perth is not a one-trick pony, like, and past performance is not an indicator of what's going to happen in the future, which is, what we've learned from you and just from lots of different content. And the economy is very diverse in Perth as well, and especially in the Rockingham area, and the growth we've seen in that property in 1 year has actually been 20%. So that property on the last valuation has actually grown by 100,000, just that one property.
So you got it for 420. You're saying it's worth 520 now?
Based on resale sales with the land value. But also the thing with that property is there's huge equity uplift in it. So if there was ever, we wanted to put this huge side access, if we ever want to think about a granny flat in the future, if we ever wanted to think about upgrading the bathroom, the kitchen, anything else that we wanted to do with it, there's a lot of potential in that property.
Right. And I just want to say, just as a sidebar, like the unemployment rate in Rockingham right now is not fantastic. Like it's above 8%. So it's just once again like a really good case study of how you can't just take one headline economic statistic and say, oh, that means we shouldn't invest in that area. In fact, unemployment matters nothing when it comes to house price growth. It's employment. You can have the unemployment rate increasing at the same time you can have the absolute amount of people employed increasing, and that is what determines, well, one of the contributing factors towards demand. So it's really subtle, and I'm glad that you overlooked purposely, hopefully, things like that. As a female, like coming back to what we sort of introduced this show as a female, did you, from Melbourne, did you find there was something that was more challenging than you expected when you bought this interstate property, dealing with, property managers or agents or what have you? Was there any hurdles that you had to face?
Yeah, for sure. So I don't necessarily know, because I don't want to label it as a female thing, but certain agents just seemed super dismissive. It may have been the East Coast investor tag as well at the time. I think people have a lot of unconscious bias when they pick up a phone and hear the female's voice. The assumption may have been that I was working on behalf of somebody else and that the property was not for me. But I think that all turned around when they saw how ferocious I was, insofar as like I have a property manager, I want them to come tomorrow, I don't want this home to go to an open, this is our offer, it's only valid for 24 hours, you can go back to your client, if not we will move on. But again, this was at a time when it was hard to buy there, but not as difficult as it is now. This is the start of 2022. This is January, like now, as you know, well, as you know yourself, the days on market are just tightening more and more. And as you would say yourself, I think we're in for a lot more growth in the next few years.
Yeah. And so did you buy any more in Perth, or did you come back to the East Coast? Go ahead.
Yes, but again, so again, it's like blocking out the noise and trusting not just trusting your gut, but trusting yourself in your learning and your education. So we bought a property in Secret Harbour, so the next suburb over. So a completely different property, 2005 build, 4x2, really close to the Comet Bay Primary School, and understanding the demographics of people within that area and that street in particular, as you would say, down to the micro level, it's all owner occupiers. you know, and real professionals like, you know, nurses, people who work for the police. So that property, a newer property we purchased in March for 440,000. That property actually rents for 550 a week. That's had a recent rent increase as well. So again, a 6%, 6.3% yielding property that again has grown to over the $500,000 mark, and that's not even 12 months yet.
And in that same time, interest rates have been going up. So overall, you'd think
Right.
that there'd be headwinds against the property market, but you know, your specific properties and the specific areas that you bought have been doing well, which is, I mean, I don't know if you're comfortable about sharing this, but like, how did your partner kind of come on board the journey? I mean, you're buying properties at a time when the media is saying everything is going to be doom and gloom. Was your partner like supportive, or were they like, Dawn, what are you doing? Like, this is our life savings.
No, like extremely supportive, and I think that's what makes it work, because you know they were just as invested in educating themselves as well. And you know, my partner Melissa, she's Australian, and she is like a spreadsheet guru. She is the finance expert in our house, so
Nice.
it just marries really, really well. She did have to be convinced to go back to Perth a second time, so because obviously diversifying was in our head, but we couldn't go past the data. It was just too good. And comparing it to, you know, Perth's borders were closed all that time, and they didn't have the COVID boom that everybody else experienced. And the median, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I last look at it, it's still $200,000 behind Brisbane, like the median.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still a lot of room in Perth. And I think, you know, maybe the Perth naysayers might regret their decision in the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I do. I remember, and I'm sure you can too, early last year, maybe even 2021, on our Facebook community. Obviously, everyone was bigging up the East Coast because it was a COVID-induced boom in many parts. But then everyone was like, Perth, no way. Like, there's so much like risk going to Perth. And I was like, oh, like just putting my hand up quietly, like, guys, come on. Like, this is a piece of gold over here. And everyone's like, shut up, PK. Like, we're looking at the East Coast. I'm like, dude, look that way. And it's just, I mean, I felt like I was the outspoken one. Of course, you were investing there, as were clients and things like that. So you got two in Perth. I mean, it sort of goes against general diversification principles to like buy two properties in two neighboring suburbs. But there's also a school of thought that if you know what you're doing, like if you're really confident in it, then you just double down and go really hard, really deep into, you know, making money in the way that you know how. And that seems like what you've done.
Yeah.
And so I assume that was the last one in Perth. Where did
Right.
you go next?
Next, we actually ventured outside of Bundaberg to Bagara. Bagara is just, again, we've never been to Bagara. We've had some relatives that have done some caravanning around there and just said what a beautiful spot it was. And you know, Bundaberg is just such exciting things for Bundaberg over the next, you know, 10 years. And Bagara was a real kind of lifestyle uh, property choice for us. So we had purchased that property. Again, this was a very hot market going into it, because that was June 2022. I think there was 20 offers on the home, and he was about to present all the offers, and we were like, okay, this is our offer. So it's like 700 meters to the beach, and this one is a 3x1. Again, I think it was around 700 square meters. Not that that matters, but it matters for our plans for the future. But we got that it was our most expensive purchase at 480,000, but it rented straight away for 550 a week, a 3x1. And that property it has huge equity uplift potential, very easy to turn into a 4x2. And it's just a beautiful spot.
Yeah. Like when you're talking, you come across as like very experienced and very seasoned investor. When you talk about 4x2, you're like equity uplift potential, fourth bedroom, this and that. Like, I just have to go back and remind myself that you've only been in the game for like 12 months. For those people who have also been consuming content, whether it's mine or anyone else's on different platforms, but they don't have the confidence that you do, or at least you appear to have. Like I come across so many investors who have been literally umming and ahhing through the COVID period and now are like kicking themselves for not investing, but they're still not confident to invest. They're still not 100% sure what their strategy. They're still not like willing to put down their money on a deposit. Like, what would be your advice to them who presumably been watching the same content as you, but are in a completely different outcome?
I think most of it comes down to mindset and unfortunately what I see in my job. So as an intensive care nurse, I see people having the worst days of their lives. So seeing people go through that and help them through that then makes me not afraid of the unknown. If anything, it drives me to be like, well, why can't we achieve what the 0.1% of people in Australia achieve? And that COVID growth is a perfect example, because we'll always go back to that and be like, oh, if we started investing in 2020, we would be sitting on, like everybody does. But people might have had pre-approvals that have lapsed for months and months and months, and in that they've missed out on, $100,000, $50,000 all the time working in a job that they're thinking, oh, how can I be at home more with my family, or how can I go on this trip, or how can I go stay in this campsite, or how can I help other people. So I think that like don't be afraid, firstly, and specifically around your course. I see your success stories every day. I think for me uniquely is that through my job I have to communicate with people through the toughest days of their lives. So in comparison to that, securing a property and being ferocious in securing that is a skill that I have learned somehow through nursing and through communication, and done quite a lot of management roles in nursing, hiring a lot of nurses. So I think there's a different skill set that comes from that complements securing properties really, really well. But if you're at home with your pre-approval, stop thinking about it. Don't be scared. PK and his community have so much to offer you to help you to succeed in property investing. You don't have to spend 500,000. You can spend 400,000, 350,000, but the prices won't be like that for long, will they, PK?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm not like some magician or anything, but I struggle to see how in 5 years' time you can buy anything in Australia anywhere, really, like half decent for under 500,000. Like, I don't know. I just don't see that world. So I think if you're, and this is one of the questions I was going to ask you maybe later as well, if you're on an average income, like what I'm talking about is like you're not on like 300K a year or
No.
anything. Like, I think maybe property investing will be only for the rich in
Mm-hmm.
5 or 10. I don't know. Like, I generally don't know, but it tends to be trending that way just from where property prices are going and the decoupling versus wages. Um, I think the next question maybe I'll ask you, Dawn, because I know that you, because I've kind of seen your journey unfold to some extent as you've shared your journey on the Facebook community. And I know that after those 3 properties, you kept posting that, oh, look, I can buy another one, but I'm scared to go to North Queensland. It's no surprise that like tons of my clients been buying in places like Townsville, not just anywhere, but select locations, select types of properties. And you're just like, oh, the council rates are so high, the insurance premiums are so like, etc., etc. Why were you fearful, and how did you get yourself over that fear? Because I certainly didn't like tell you what to do. So like,
Oh.
so how did that all go down?
Well, it just made sense, really. So, like, firstly, Townsville is not some backwater. It's like a bustling. city of 200,000 people, I assumed I would need a canoe and to, man some sort of a boat when the whole place would go underwater. So, again, I had formed that perception of Townsville based on other people, based on this outside noise, without actually doing any research myself. So then going back to seeing the supply there, the decreasing supply, the days on market, I was like, like why am I so scared of this? So we really spent a lot of time educating ourselves on how diverse an economy it is, and the amount of people that choose to live there. Not everybody is just getting eaten by crocodiles, and they're like going to
No,
NRL.
that's Darwin. That's the
Yeah.
other thing.
So that property was actually in Carwin, and a 4x2, again, large uh, block size. Not to say that buying on a smaller block size has its place as well. It just so happened that that was the block size it was on. It was 700 square meters. We actually reduced that price on that after building and pest inspection. Just some very minor things came back on it, because for Queensland properties, what we found is it's actually quite easy to get a price reduction once the building and pest is done, because they want to keep you as a buyer. Whereas in WA, you have to be quite careful, because once you sign, there's no cooling off period. Whereas in Queensland, you have a lot more flexibility with your building and pests. So we negotiated that down. We got that property for 425,000. And that one rents for 520 a week. But that property was a big learning curve for us. It was the first time we had to discuss that we weren't happy with the way the property was being managed, or that we were being communicated to. And we also had to replace an air conditioner in that property. Again, it's all mindset stuff. So the 2,000 we had to spend in an aircon, that's fine. The property's already gone up 20,000, since we bought it. And overall, the 4 properties over the last year, we actually were doing valuations this morning, it has grown 250,000 in total.
Right. $250,000. How much, I don't know if you know the math in your head, but how much deposit did you put down across those 4 properties?
So yes, some of them are like 80, one of them is 80% deposit, but the rest, there's one of them that's 90% deposit. Again, lots of learning. Our first property, we did it as P&I, because the old rhetoric, we were like, we need to pay down this debt. Whereas now we're like, give us all the debt immediately, please. And then like releasing the equity from our PPOR and using some savings, and really not being scared to really like try and boost our portfolio as quickly and as safely as we can. Of course, you need to have some cash as a buffer, especially for those things, as you would say, like whether it's a hot water system, air conditioner. But you need to make sure your mindset is strong to realize that is not a bad thing. So think about the overall growth and the position that you're going to be in 10 years, and the position that your family is going to be in.
Yeah.
And we just want to keep building the portfolio.
That's phenomenal. I mean, just some rough numbers. If you've bought
Yeah.
properties between 4 and 500K, and you put down, let's say, 10 to 20% deposit on each of them, then the total deposit that you probably put down is like between 2 and 300K over the last 12 months. And if the equity rise across those 4 properties, which you just mentioned, is about 250, then that's like 100% return on investment, like in around 12 months. 100%. Like, you can't get that. You can't get that in a hedge fund. You can't get that
No.
through Michael Burry. You can't get that in the stock market. Like and that is during interest rate rising period. That is during quantitative tightening. Of course, it's not going to be like that linearly every single
No.
year. It goes
No.
through ebbs and flows, but the leverage is the power of property. And there's one thing that I think a lot of people still don't fully understand, and they're very skeptical on it. And that's this concept of, like, just like many of my clients, like, they buy a lot of properties very quickly because they have the right buffers, they have the right risk mitigation techniques, etc. And there's a school of thought to say, all right, well, Dawn and PK, you guys are high-fiving each other, you're patting yourself on the back, but hey, like interest rates are rising. If they rise another, I don't know, like another 1%, if the average lending rate that you're all of a sudden having to pay is like 6%, 6.5%, 7%, then it all comes crumbling down. Say goodbye to your 250K equity, your properties will go down. And even if they don't go down, like you won't be able to keep them because they're costing you so much. Like you're a nurse, right? You're not like some hedge
No.
fund manager, you're not like some investment banker, you're like a community servant almost is how I see nurses because they're so grossly underpaid for what they do. But like on your sort of income, how are you scared of rising interest rates or how do you perceive them?
No, because what goes up must come down, and at some point they can't just keep going up. But any of our projections, so even at the start, we had stress tested our portfolio at interest rates of 6%. We never based it off of the 3% that we got two of the properties for at the beginning. One of our interest rates was already, we got a letter in, it's already at 7%. So, but once we can refinance, again, we see this as it's always going to be a long-term vision in our head. So we may have to, spend a couple of thousand this year with interest rates, but that couple of thousand pales in comparison to the capital growth and also the rental increases that are going to happen. Like the gross rent minus like no expenses obviously is 110,000 off of those four properties. And obviously there's 30K in expenses every year with insurances, rates, um, everything else that comes with it, and then obviously the mortgage repayments. But and that's year one. So I think I would be more scared of getting to 60 and not having spent time with my son, watching him grow up. He's only 2, or being able to afford to give him every educational opportunity. Or I'm more scared of that. And as I said, working in intensive care, seeing that people's lives can change on a dime, the fear of the unknown does not scare me at all, because I've seen people's realities be so painful that they would give anything to have taken a chance in life. So leveraging the bank's money doesn't scare me. We have buffers in place to help with the interest rates. And if they go to 10% or 12%, maybe I'll have to work an extra shift, but like they will come back down at some point, as they will go up and down over the next 20 years based on different cycles.
Sure. I hope, I'm sure they're not going to go up to 10%.
No, but
So yeah, I get your point. And have you had to like, have you had to change your lifestyle at the moment? You've got, like, as well as your principal place, you've got 5 mortgages now. Like, are you scrimping? Are you not? I mean, you just went on an overseas trip, of course, right now, but are you like cutting back in different parts of your life or you're not needing to?
no, like because life is short, and so over our last 10 years we've tried to build up savings. So, and a lot of our friends will say this, they'll be like, when we were all partying in their late 20s, we were buying properties, and they now will say, oh, we wish we did that. And like I said, we don't care about things. Like I've no intention of, like, the goal isn't to drive a Lamborghini or to get some validation through that by any means. It's just to be the best role model and an example for our child. That's the whole purpose.
Amazing. That's such a refreshing and honorable kind of mindset to have, something that I'm just trying to learn more and more of for myself as well. I did hear this quote. I don't know who it's from, but it goes something like, it's the things that we regret in the future are not those things that we did and failed at, but those things that we never ended up doing, and we regret not ending up doing those things, and because of fear or what have you. And I think you're in this kind of unique situation because of your job. You're sort of you're amongst those people who are regretting, and like you're saying, they're not regretting, oh, I did that and I felt, it's like, I only wish I did that, but I was too afraid to do that. um maybe we'll just finish up as well, Dawn, with like, what are your goals? Like, I know you definitely mentioned, giving all the educational opportunities to your 2-year-old son and what have you. There's this kind of line of thought that a lot of people in property, like especially people trying to sell you stuff, they're like, oh, create this amazing vision or dream, and then they try to like, put themselves between your current state and that future state and be like, I'm the solution. But it doesn't, like, like a dream is just a wish without a plan. Like, you have a plan, you have some sort of concrete action plan to get there. But what is your like tangible goal? I don't know, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Is there something there around your son, or is it beyond that? Or just maybe talk about that a little bit more.
Definitely. So we want to help other people achieve what we have achieved, and not be scared to do that. And I know you have your own opinion on buyers agents, and I have my own opinions as well, um, insofar as what I've seen and where certain people have bought properties for others that I can assume that you would never suggest to buy there, and I certainly would not buy in those places myself. And I just don't want that to continue to happen to people.
Hmm.
And um, or my real goal is to help others in the medical field, nurses specifically, retire early and not be on that race to nowhere where you're working night shifts when you're 50, and you're relying on your super. And yeah, you retire asset rich. Your PPR might be $3 million by the time you retire, but how are you going to eat? How are you going to like go on trips that you want to go on? You need cash flow, and you can achieve that through property. So that's the biggest thing, is that is that's what we want to do, and also to continue to grow our own portfolio to escape it's not 9 to 5 because I work shift work, 12-hour shifts. um but yeah, it's just to have that freedom of time and to help others do that. And it perplexes me as a nurse, because as you say, we're not like paid extraordinarily well, but to see like the charges that some buyers agents charge in comparison to your course, or in comparison to anything, it's just extraordinary. And we would want to be very competitive in that area, and as a female, to help other females succeed in property.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's a wonderful thing, like when you try to help someone from a genuine place of, like, your cup is overfilling or over, it's like spilling over. You've
Yes.
achieved something, like, not the world, but you've achieved something, and then you want to pass it on. And then this kind of like, oh, well, why don't you do it for free? Why don't you do it as a charity if you really care about something? It's like, no, no, like conscious capitalism, like,
Yes.
we also need to put clothes on our back, right? Like, we also need to get ahead. But
True,
why
but
can't we
like
help
I'm
people?
putting like Kmart clothes on my back. I'm not like out there like buying Gucci,
Right.
by any means, nor do I have any intention. But yeah, it's just about helping other people like believe that they can achieve this stuff, that it's not out of their reach. So you've helped us to realize that through your content, and then we just want to help other people do that as well, because it's an industry that's full of car salesman type people that can appear at times to be disingenuous. And I couldn't sleep at night if I had secured a property for someone that I wouldn't have secured for myself. Like I literally, like, ethically could not do that for the sake of a quick dollar. That's not going to benefit anyone in the long term, karma wise, or an example for your family or how you should be living your life. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I'm sure I
Yeah.
know. there?
I don't know. Like, I mean, ripping someone off is bad, full stop. Ripping them off of $1, okay, like you can sleep. But like
Mm.
honestly, when someone puts down like 50 to $100,000 in a
No.
deposit and you're like, it's not a good deal, but you just
Mhm.
made $15,000 as a buyer's agent commission, like,
Mm.
look, I'm not a saint. Like, every saint has a past, every sinner and future, but like, I don't want to look at those people. I can't understand that concept or that mindset. So I'm so happy that you're coming at it or from a really, really genuine and purpose-driven and authentic space. And when I post this chat in our Facebook group, anyone who's watching or listening, you can get in touch with Dawn. I'll link her or tag her, and that's the thing. Like whether it's Dawn or anyone else, like you should engage with
Mhm.
investors. Don't just be on the sidelines, be like, oh, not sure if Dawn is making stuff up, not sure if PK is making stuff up, not sure if property investing works, not sure if it's the right time to buy. Ask people what their failures have been, not
Mhm.
just what their successes have been. Even
Mhm.
my clients, it's not like every one of them is just like an automatic like magic pill. They're just like amazing. No, they go on journeys too.
Mhm.
So ask them for their warts and all, and that kind of builds confidence. Um, is there anything else, Dawn, just before we wrap up, truly, that you would like to say to anyone who's watching or listening that was perhaps in your situation 12 months ago, hadn't bought any properties but really wanted to?
So it would just be to really block out all that noise. Don't buy a canoe for Townsville. 200,000 people live there. Don't fear the unknown. And I guess what I've learned is, don't have an opinion on something unless you are educated on it. So I think anybody can fall into that based on their own, limiting beliefs or what they've been taught. And people might say, oh, how could you take on that much debt? And that's the bank's money. Yes, we have taken on that much debt, but there's no reward without risk. And I prefer to be in the game than on the sidelines going, oh, I wish I could have a turn. So just get stuck in, and PK has so much content. You can learn so much from PK, and even the Facebook community. Everyone is so supportive. And there's so many amazing brokers on there and just other people full of knowledge. You've really built an empire, PK. So, and I'm sure it's going to keep growing. Your own personal one, as well as because without you and your knowledge, like I wouldn't be sitting here. My family wouldn't be in the position that they are in. And hopefully in 10 years' time, people will be saying, "Oh, I wish I bought in Perth, or I wish I bought in Townsville, or even now, like what about Rockhampton? What about all these other places?"
Yeah, yeah. Don't give too much away. No, I'm just joking.
I would,
No, no, 100%. And the community is really kind. Like what I've
yes.
really tried to build is a kind community. We're trying to facilitate something that is like conducive to someone who's nervous, to someone who's like unsure, who someone wants support. Like, and there's thousands of people, and there are almost 30,000 now who are just kind souls trying to help each other. That's a really rare thing to find. So like, I'm really, really grateful, Dawn, not just for doing this episode, but actually just also contributing, like I said at the start, to that community. You've been actually pretty instrumental. I'm sure there are others who are attributing their success in part to your comments, your feedback, and your suggestions to them. I don't know if people DM you. I'm sure they do, and you've helped them a ton. But yeah, on behalf of all of them as well, yeah, big congratulations, of course, and thank you.
Thanks, PK. Thank you.
Um, All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And one point that I just want to stress, it's kind of like it might have got missed right at the end, which Dawn said, is don't be scared of getting debt. In an inflationary time, your cash in the bank is eroding. And in an inflationary time, debt is also eroding. So you can decide which one you want to erode, whether it's your own money or the bank's money that you're borrowing. But that's just a sort of tactical thing I thought, oh, let me just highlight. But I hope you take the actionable insights that Dawn has shared and actually put them to work, not just be another knowledge bomb, but actually put it into action. Like that is what counts. And of course, you know, property investing is for everyone and anyone, not just if you're female or male, but especially I hope that those of you from the fairer sex that are watching or listening, you got some extra inspiration and education from Dawn, because yeah, you too can do it. And thank you so much again, Dawn.
No problem. Thanks for having me.